Having just spent the first part of this tutorial looking at the camera obscura, we're now going to focus our attention onto the pinhole camera and think about the way this works in relation to the digital cameras that we most commonly use nowadays. Much like the camera obscura, anything that can be made light tight can be made into a pinhole camera. So we've got examples here of pinhole cameras being made out of sweet tins, but I've seen examples out of baked bean cans, Coke cans, anything that is, again, a material that's essentially opaque, light tight, that an aperture can be made in and something can be put into the device to receive the image. Our Year 10 students, having made a camera obscura out of a Pringles can, go on to make a pinhole camera out of a small favour box. An example of that can be seen in the bottom left hand side of this slide, and a diagram of how the pinhole camera works can be seen on the right. If we look at the top left, we've got an example here of a film camera, and let's look at this first to see how the film camera works in receiving light. The aperture at the front of the lens opens to allow light to pass through. The mirrored device here is reflecting the light upwards into this prism optical device, which will continue to reflect the image up the right way round for the photographer to see via the viewfinder. Once the shutter is pressed, the mirror falls down or rocks down to enable the light to pass straight through past the shutter that has now been opened to the film. Now if this was a digital camera, the same principles would apply, but instead of the light hitting the film, it would hit the digital camera's sensor, receiving the image there. So the pinhole camera made out of this favour box has been made using a piece of aluminium stuck to the inside of the box and a small tiny pinhole pierced through that aluminium. Now that acts as our aperture. It's made out of metal because metal is opaque, and again we are preserving the quality of this favour box by ensuring that only the light coming into the pinhole camera will be coming through the aperture and nowhere else. Every other seam is taped carefully with black duct tape, so that again the only light that come through will be through that pinhole. The shutter we can see in the diagram is this cardboard flap that the students quite crudely attach to the outside of the box, and with the hands they will simply open the shutter, the cardboard flap, away from the aperture to allow light in, and close it once they have received the right amount of light. The ISO in a camera, and particularly in this pinhole camera, refers to the light sensitive paper at the rear of the pinhole camera box. The ISO refers to the sensitivity of the surface receiving and capturing the light, and basically therefore the image. So when we think about ISO, we think about it in terms of a numerical value and scale. Low numbers like 80 and 100 represent a sensor or piece of film or paper that is not very sensitive to light. Really high numbers, as you can see in this diagram here, would be examples of paper or film or the sensor being very, very sensitive to light. Now, our decision of what type of ISO to use is crucial when we come to evaluate the light available to us as photographers. So the aperture, ISO and shutter speed all form part of the exposure triangle, and what this essentially represents is a relationship between three elements found commonly on a camera. These are the elements responsible for capturing a well-exposed photograph. Each element has a further and specific impact on the resulting image, and such factors can be seen on the inside of the triangle. Over the next few workshops that we will be uploading, we will look at the effects of changing the aperture and changing the shutter speed more closely. Once one element changes, in order for a photographer to achieve the well-exposed photograph, the other two will have to adapt. Now, I've used the term well-exposed quite a lot without actually discussing what I mean by that. Looking at these three examples on this slide, we would consider the image on the right to be the most well-exposed photograph of the three. It's got the best balance between light and dark. When you look at an image that has got very deep, dark black tones, or equally very bright white points, we consider those points loss of detail. And as photographers, detail is crucial. We don't want to lose any detail in our image. One might argue that actually the background, particularly the grass and the tree on the image on the left, would be really useful in our well-exposed photograph. But given the fact that there's bubbles and there's a dog here, it would be incredibly hard to get both the dog and that background perfectly well exposed. So we might have to do a lot of work in the darkroom or on Photoshop, dodging and burning that background to make it a little bit lighter. But the one on the left I'd still consider to be overexposed. We've lost the detail on the dog, which has to be the main focus of the photograph. It is the key subject matter. And the image in the middle is clearly underexposed. Not enough light has been allowed into the camera.